Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to review El Camino, the Breaking Bad sequel movie. I will give a warning before I get to the spoiler part, and I thought this movie was great, I loved it, I thought it really feels like the continuation of the same universe, it has a lot of the same characters showing up, and it's made the same way, like you can feel like it's in the same kind of style, they have the same kind of way of showing things, filming things. It has a similar structure, which is not entirely linear, meaning there are all kinds of scenes taking place in the past which connect to the future in a clever way, clever editing. There are neat transition shots of showing time moving quickly, kind of a speed up effect that was used on the show a lot, and I love that kind of style. It has a similar humor, it has all kinds of dark humor moments. It has similar scenes of building up suspense and tension and all kinds of little mysteries which they don't reveal the answer right away. They let you think about it for a while. It kind of builds the suspense. The humor, as I said, sometimes kind of a dark humor, especially with one of the characters who kind of they brought back. And that character, which I will elaborate on in my spoiler section, has that kind of dichotomy which I find funny, like he's super evil but also super nice at the same time, and I don't know why, but I find that very funny. And it has all that tension between Jesse and that character, and it all has some subtle complexity to it, and the acting is really good, especially by Aaron. I think he did an excellent job. And the movie also had some brand new characters who are also interesting, also memorable, and it had a few cameos from Breaking Bad and even one from Better Call Saul. Not everybody showed up, of course. It's not a reunion, it's not just all the actors showing up. All the characters that did show up had some kind of purpose to it, either to the story itself or to the character of Jesse. And the movie was also very psychological, like in the beginning it shows Jesse having kind of a PTSD and all of that. And all those flashback scenes I mentioned, also they all served a purpose. They were not just inserted there for no reason, but all those flashbacks had something to do with the current storyline, meaning all the flashbacks were tied to something happening in the present, and that's why they were shown, just like it was sometimes done on the show itself. So it's the same kind of style, non-linear sometimes, but always with a purpose to it. I also enjoyed the attention to detail in this movie, just like in the show itself. There was a lot of things, like small things in the background that you might not even notice, but it actually ties to something that was on the show previously. And I love the way this movie kind of tied up all the loose ends, and it really gave a satisfactory resolution. There was something that a lot of people probably were hoping for, and it didn't really happen, but I love the way that the movie kind of kept postponing the answer to that question to let us keep wondering about it a little bit before revealing it, and then it also had some emotional impact, so it wasn't just there in the background, it had something to do with the story or to Jesse. And another minor problem, minor complaint, is that some of the actors didn't age that well. One actor in particular got a little bit fatter, and it was kind of noticeable and distracting a little bit because, you know, if you watch this by order, if you binge watch the show and then this movie, I think it would be kind of obvious. But on the other hand, I think we can easily explain that away because all of that was happening during a window of time of a lot of months. I think 6 months at least it was that window of time in which that flashback scene was taking place, and we can assume during that time maybe that character had enough time to gain weight and then lose it back again, especially since he maybe had some motivation to impress some woman. So maybe that's why he did it. I would have loved if they actually included some kind of little bit about it in the actual movie. You know, that person showed his apartment in the movie, and he was showing off all kinds of stuff, so maybe they should have also showed like gym equipment or some cardio machine, and him saying, oh, I just got this yesterday and I'm going to start training every day now because I want to get back into shape or something. If they had such a line, that would have explained that issue in a funny way. Maybe they should have done that. So I do think it was good to have that actor back, to have that character back, to explore some more of him, because we kind of got too little of it in the show. And this movie did feel like a few more episodes of the show. It felt like a season 6 of a few episodes to finish off that storyline, so that was good. And there was a cameo that all fans of Breaking Bad would definitely love to see, but maybe some people would be disappointed it was a flashback. And my final thoughts on this movie is that I don't think it would work as a standalone movie, meaning if you never watch the show and you only watch this movie, you probably wouldn't get it at all. You wouldn't enjoy it as much as you would if you watch the show, especially because of all those scenes tying to the past taking place inside episodes that you are supposed to know about. And if you don't, it might be confusing for you, this movie. And if you don't remember the last few episodes, I suggest you rewatch them before you watch this movie to really get it perfectly and to see all those little details, all that attention to detail. You will appreciate it a lot more if you remember it well. So if you don't, you should probably rewatch the last few episodes of season 5 before you watch this movie. So overall, this was a great sequel to Breaking Bad. Not everything everyone hoped for. I'm sure some people will be disappointed, maybe because they hoped a certain character will come back. And that character, I guess I will have to give a spoiler warning from now on. That character did show up in the movie, but it was a flashback scene of something taking place in the past, I think around season 2. But it was edited in the movie in a way that it makes you think for a moment that it is taking place in the future, so you might be kind of surprised and happy for a moment, but then you will realize it's happening in the past. But I think it works fine. I think that character of Walter White, his story was finished in the last episode. There was no real reason to bring him back. And if he would have, it would have ruined this movie, it would have distracted from it, and then there would have to be another spin-off, another sequel. And I really can't imagine what else they could have done with this character after his story was basically concluded. Just recycling the same kind of stories again, I don't think would be that interesting. Also, it would lose realism because, not only was he wounded, but also his terminal cancer and all of that, so it wouldn't really be believable to say that he survived all of that. And in the beginning of the movie, they kind of left that hanging, they kind of didn't answer the question for a while. And even when they did kind of report about it on the news, I think we can say there is some possibility yet that it's not really true because, maybe he went into witness protection, maybe they said he died to protect him so he can tell all his secrets. I guess it's possible. I guess maybe if they really want to, they could do a sequel about him as well. But would that really be necessary? Probably not. It would probably feel like fan fiction or something, so I'm glad they kind of stuck to it and resisted that temptation because otherwise it probably would have ruined this movie. I'm kind of glad how this movie dealt with it by kind of showing it on the news. It kind of kept us hanging for a while, but then revealed it, and then it had emotional impact on Jesse. And everything that was happening was always tied to Jesse. It always, we could see how it affects him. Nothing just happened for no reason. All the flashback scenes tied to something in the present or something about his future. It all had some kind of purpose. The only flashback scene which I had a minor problem with was the Mike scene, simply because I can't figure out where exactly it fit in the timeline of the continuity, because it was filmed in that same place where Mike died. He was killed by Walter, but I don't remember Jesse meeting him there, but I will have to rewatch the show to make sure if there was that kind of possibility, so that kind of bugged me a little bit. Other than that, everything was pretty perfect with the attention to the detail, the continuity. The thing with Todd, he's the actor who kind of gained a little bit too much weight, but I did like him. I liked his character because he was interesting. He was kind of unintentionally funny, like he doesn't think things through. He's impulsive, he's doing stupid stuff, and he took Jesse out of that cage to help him get rid of a body of another person that he killed. And I guess he didn't want to tell his uncle because maybe his uncle would be angry at him, so he wanted to keep it secret. Or maybe he simply didn't want to wait a few days, for the body to start rotting, so he had to do something in that same day. And his uncle and that crew was away, so he had to use Jesse. And I think it was taking place after he already killed Jesse's girlfriend, and so that makes it a little bit strange that Jesse didn't just kill him when he had the opportunity after all of that. But he did make that threat that if he escapes, then they would kill the kid as well. So that was the reason Jesse was holding himself back, and you could see in a lot of scenes that he wants to kill him, he wants to do something, but he's resisting it. And that was great. The acting was great in all those scenes, and the tension. I mean, it's strange how, even though we know how it all ended, we know that he didn't escape, we know that he killed Todd much later, and yet still the tension worked. Still, we didn't know exactly what was going to happen, and so all that suspense still worked, and that was amazing for me. The acting was great. Todd looked a little bit different, as I said, but his behavior, the way he was acting as that character, was spot on, exactly as he was in the show. Kind of being evil, but nice at the same time, and I just find that funny because it's such a dichotomy, and it also generated some dark comedy, which I loved. For example, when Jesse asks him where will he bury that lady, and then Todd kind of thinks and says, somewhere pretty, she deserves that, and then later, do you want to say a few words? And Jesse kind of looks at him. I found those moments kind of hilarious. Like, I am a fan of dark humor, and I found all those places funny, and it's the same kind of humor which was often in the show as well. And all the other parts were also great. All that tension, all that suspense, all that psychology you can see in Jesse's eyes, like what he's thinking without him saying anything. All of that was great. It was brilliant. And also all those flashback scenes tie to the present because they showed it to us to explain how come Jesse knows where Todd lives. He knows that he has money in his apartment. And also I love the attention to detail in Todd's apartment, such as that spider which he actually took from that same kid he killed at the beginning of season 5. That kid found a tarantula spider and then Todd kept it, and now we see that he still has it in his home. And Jesse sees it, and again you can see in his eyes that he wants to kill Todd for what he did and so on. And also the fact that he killed his cleaning lady by strangling her, and then we know in the end Jesse strangled Todd to death, and so that was kind of poetic justice, which we only find out about now. Because previously we thought he just killed him because he killed his girlfriend, maybe for that kid as well, maybe just to get free. But now we also find out that Todd strangled that woman to death just because she found his money, and so Jesse maybe was thinking of that as well when he did that to Todd. And so that kind of justifies that even more. It makes it even more of a poetic justice. Other attention to detail was all those little toys that Todd had in his house. And one of them was that ball with a lady who looks kind of like Lydia, and the guy who looks like Todd who kind of looks at her and admires her. So that kind of shows his obsession, that he's kind of obsessed with her, in love with her. And maybe they could have used that also to explain how he lost that weight. Maybe he should have said something to Jesse such as, check out this new equipment I just bought yesterday, and I'm going to start training every day. I want to look my best because I have a special lady in my life that I want to impress. If he said something like that, that would have been funny and would have explained this seemingly visual contradiction with the way he looked like supposedly after all these events. And because it's a few months in between, I would be totally fine with that. Another awesome thing in this movie is the friendship between Jesse and Skinny Pete and Badger. You could really see the loyalty of his friends who help him out at their own risk and all of that. By the way, that scene of Skinny Pete being interrogated is not in the movie, it was in the trailer, but it fits perfectly. It explains why he didn't have his head in that scene. And we didn't really need it in the movie. I think it works fine as a kind of separate clip. So I love their cameos, and also I think that money that they gave him is the same money that Walter gave to them in that last episode, and I think that's great as well because it's like that final gift from Walter to Jesse, so that's also kind of ironic, I think. And that guy who makes people disappear, the guy who gives people false identities, made a comeback in the movie, and he was great as well. And that actor sadly died, I think, just one day after that movie was released. So that's his final appearance, and I think he was great in that movie. He's a really interesting character as well. Also a little bit complexity, like he didn't want to help Jesse because Jesse didn't have the exact same amount of money that he demands, and I was kind of wondering why is he being like that. But I think maybe it was for Jesse's own good. Maybe he wasn't, it was presented as if he's just so cold-hearted that he demands the exact amount, but I think maybe he simply knew that Jesse would need that money for himself, because you have to have some spending money to start a new life and all of that, so that's probably why he wanted him to get more money before he makes him into a different person, to hide him better. And so maybe it wasn't purely out of selfish needs. Maybe he wanted Jesse to have it, to make sure that Jesse doesn't get caught later and so on. So I think it wasn't all selfish. At least that's the vibe I got from all those scenes, because that guy seems to be kind of a nice guy. He probably knew who Jesse is, he saw the news, and so he knows he's a high profile, so that's why he wanted to double the amount, and he wanted to make sure Jesse will be able to live on some money later. Also, I guess he doesn't want to lower his price too much, because, you know, if one criminal hears about it, like everybody will want a lower price, so he has to stand his ground. And also there was some bit of comedy of him calling the police and then Jesse thinking that he faked it, but then it turns out to be true and all of that. So the movie had a whole bunch of kind of comedic twists and stuff like that. And the Walter scene I think was great as well, because once again it ties to Jesse's future, just like the Mike scene in the beginning also ties to his future, and the same with the Jane cameo. And about Walter's cameo, I think the only problem with that was that you can tell that it's a bald cap. You could see that his head looks a little bit unnatural. It looks a little bit bigger than you remember it. The makeup did look very professional, very good, but still you can tell that it's just a little bit too big, and your brain can kind of tell that, it can kind of sense that something is off. So that's really my only complaint about that scene. And I think all the actors did a really good job of playing their characters exactly as they were in those time frames in which they appeared in. Aaron Paul was absolutely excellent because he played Jesse in those different time periods, and each time he appeared he looked and behaved exactly the way that you remember from the show. So that was very perfect acting. and especially good were all those scenes of him having PTSD and all of that. And then in the end of the movie, he kind of became a badass. You can really see that in his body language, in his expressions. You can really see how much he changed, and so that was great. And also I love that story of a character who starts out kind of broken, depressed, scared, and he rises above that, he overcomes that fear and manages to take control of his destiny and all of that. I just love those kinds of stories. So I think it's a great movie. It's a great send-off to that character and a great wrap-up to the series. There was a lot of attention to detail, a lot of little things in the background that only hardcore fans will notice. For example, when Jesse was listening to the news on the radio, they finished talking about Heisenberg, and then they said in other news and started talking about a drop in Nasdaq, and I found that funny because I remember that scene in Breaking Bad in which Walter was telling Skyler that his business is so big that it could have been listed on the Nasdaq. And so I think that was a reference to that they said on the news that Nasdaq is dropping right after finishing talking about the downfall of Heisenberg, and so it implies that it's somehow connected, and it's a reference to that scene with Walter. So I think those kinds of little details, that kind of attention to detail is simply golden in my opinion. It adds a lot of rewatchability to it. So that's pretty much all I had to say, and so I highly recommend this movie if you're a fan of the show. If you're not a fan of the show, then become a fan of the show. I definitely recommend the show. I think it's one of the best shows I ever saw. And if you got this far in the review, you probably know that. So that's all I had to say. Let me know what you think and we can discuss it in the comment section, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.